Welcome back, everyone. So far, we've been doing all of our modeling with meshes, but Blender does provide us some other ways to create shapes. One of those ways is with curves, and today I'd like to talk about Bezier curves and circles. Now, we can create a curve just as simply as we do a mesh. As you can see, I've deleted my default cube, and I've moved into a top orthographic mode. I'm going to hit Shift A just like if I wanted to make a mesh. And right below mesh we have curve. And I'll choose Bezier curve. Blender gives us this nice default curve to work with. If we tab into edit mode, we can have a look at the sub-objects that make up our Bezier curve. We have three sub-objects. These very visible pink lines are our handles. Slightly less visible are these little orange dots at the center of the line and center of the handle and at both ends of the handle. These are our control points. And we have the curve itself, which now shows arrows on it and is referred to as a segment. The arrows will always go, well, you can choose to think of it as left to right on a simple curve like this, or if it were a circle or a square, you can think of it as moving clockwise. Alright, what can we do with all of this? Well, first of all, I'm going to add in another control point, because we can subdivide our curve just like we do a mesh. So, if I hit W and subdivide, I get a new control point right in the middle. The other thing that we have to talk about are the types of control points or control handles that we can use. It's time to learn a new hotkey, and that hotkey is V. If we hit V and bring that up, we'll get a set handle type dialog. Now, by default, when we create our curve, it comes in as aligned handles on it. But we also have a choice of automatic, vector, and free. It also has a toggle, but honestly I find I don't use that very much. Right now we're in aligned. Let's try setting this to automatic. What happened? Well, in automatic, Blender basically automatically attempts to make the smoothest curve it possibly can from the control points. We can also go back and try a new one. Let's try vector. Vector kind of does just the opposite. Vector attempts to create a perfectly straight vector line between every control point. So we get this nice sharp edge. We also have free. Let's hit V again and try free. Free shows up as these red lines, and the difference between free, vector, and automatic, and aligned, is that the two endpoints can move independently of each other. If I select this one, and I move it, it changes my curve here. In this case, if I select this one and move it, nothing happens. That has to do with that clockwise or left to right motion that I mentioned earlier. Since this is where our curve begins, this part of our handle deals with that to the curve behind it. And there is no curve behind it in this case, so we get nothing. This handle deals with this center point to this center point. So when we manipulate it, we get some curve. The opposite is true here. If I manipulate this one, the same part of the line is manipulated, but that's because it's that behind, so to speak. And here deals with this center point to the end, or the forward part. So you can see you can get some pretty nifty shapes by manipulating these in terms of moving them and pulling them out. So that's all very handy. There's a couple other things to note though. Let's grab all of these again. And let's set it to automatic. We're back to our nice curve. But what happens if we want to manipulate that curve? I'm going to grab a handle here and move it. Well, we no longer get the most smooth curve that we could, and our line has turned pink, which is equivalent to being a lined handle. Automatic, once you manipulate it, will always turn into an aligned handle. Let's select this one and make it a vector. Now we get this nice straight line, and as straight a line as it can make working against this other type of handle. What happens if we manipulate the straight line here? Again, we are allowed to manipulate the curve, and again, our handle has changed color. That's because just like automatic will become aligned, when you manipulate it, vector will become a free handle. That's just something to be aware of as you're attempting to create shapes by creating sharp edges or curves. It's actually incredibly intuitive and very easy to work with once you get used to it. All right. We have a couple other things to talk about. We've seen where we can subdivide our curve, but what if we wanted to add additional curves? Well, we can do that too. When we're working with these, we can simply hold Control when we're in edit mode and left click. Now we've made a wholly independent new control point. We could do that again, and they fill in when they're selected. Now we have a whole new line. Here we see that I deselected everything first and was again able to create a wholly independent control point. If I deselect that, I can repeat the process and get another one here. If I select them both, then much like filling in edges or something like that with a mesh, I can hit F and it will fill in a line between those. All right, I'm going to get rid of all of this because our workspace is getting a little bit messy. And I'm going to create a new curve. Now this is all well and good. I'll select this control point. I'll hold down Control and make a new. And I'll do that again by holding down Control and clicking over here. Now what if I want this shape I've made to be closed? There's two ways to accomplish that. I could select this one and use F just like I did to fill in those two there. Or I can come over here to my curve data block, and if I scroll down, in the active spline we have cyclic for circle, and if we check that, it will automatically fill that in. Now we have a completed spline, in this case in the pretty rough shape of a circle, but you get the idea. So that's very handy to work with. Now, there's a couple other things that we can do too. So far, we've been working in this top-down view, and the only thing that we've really seen worked with is the X and Y axis. If I rotate my view a little bit, you can see that we do get a Z axis, and we can manipulate this spline on the Z axis. At least by default we can. If we scroll back up over in our data block, we can see that we defaulted to a 3D shape, but we have the option to make it a 2D shape. And a couple of things will happen when we do that. First of all, I'll no longer be able to move in a z-axis. Second of all, our shape fills in when it's in 2D mode to look like geometry. It's really not geometry yet, but it's there so you can see what you're doing a little bit better. I'll go back to 3D just to make life simpler there. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this once again. This time, I'm going to create a circle. Now we're going to manipulate this a little bit and actually create something. And then I'll show you what we can do with that to actually get a mesh out of it. So I think the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm kind of freeforming here because I wasn't sure what I wanted to make. But then my cat sat here meowing at me and inspired me. So I'm going to grab this bottom one and I'm going to make it a vector. And this is a good time for us to talk about additional keys. I can hit V to bring up my menu. And then after that, I can hit a key to choose these automatically. In the case of vector, that will be V. And in fact, automatic, vector, and free are all just their first letters. So you could hit VA, VV, or VF to select any of those. Since A is already used, we can't use that for aligned. But we can use the next letter, which is L. So VA, VV, VL, and VF are our hotkeys to make these selections quickly. So if I hit V, and we get a nice vector. Now the lines aren't perfectly straight because the vector is reacting to the other curves available. For now I'm just going to pull that down because I don't want straight lines. I really just wanted to get that nice sharp point at the bottom. I'm going to select both of these control points, and then just like meshes, I'm going to hit S for scale and X for the line I want to work along, and I'm going to pull those out a little bit. And it's a good deal to remember that you can do that because it helps to keep things very symmetrical instead of trying to move them separately by hand. Now we already have these two selected. And do I want to... Yeah, I think we will. We'll select the upper one also, so we have all three. And then I think I will subdivide. And I think I will do that twice. Now we have all sorts of control points to work with. I'm going to ignore the center one for the moment, and I'm going to grab each one on either side of it, and I'm going to turn it into a vector and move it up. Then I'm going to hit scale and X and scale them in a little bit. Then I'm going to grab the outer points here, and I think I will scale those out in X a little. Ooh, maybe like that. Well, it's kind of like that. I'm going to try and get that curve just a little smoother. So we have a pretty nice curve going around here. And I think I'll move those up a little bit. Well, except I got the wrong points. We want to grab the center points. And then I think we'll scale those in a little bit. There, I kind of like that. We're getting a nice straight line here and a nice curve here. Alright, that's pretty cool. Now I think I'm going to go ahead and deselect everything, hold down Control, and create a new control point. And I'll do that again here, I think. Oh, and let's undo that. That made a complete mess, as you probably saw, because I have cyclic checked. So it tried to create this twisted up circle. And I just want a line. So I'm going to uncheck that and do it again. Now we got a nice line. I'm going to do that again. And again out here. Down here. In the middle. And then I'm going to select both of those and fill that. All right. With all those curves, I guess that kind of looks like a cat's tail. But we're going to manipulate this a little bit. I'm going to make this last one that's selected a vector. And I'm going to do the same thing there. And I'm going to move this point down a little bit. And I think I'll do the same thing up here. I'm going to make it a vector. And the same with this one. And then I think I'll make these a free VF. And then I can grab these and manipulate that curve a little. And there we go. I like that. Now if we go to 2D, that's a pretty neat shape. I can live with that. And in the interest of time, we won't keep going from there. We could do some more things with it to make it a little cooler, but this will do. So, we're in 2D, and we've got this all done. If we tab back into object mode, we can see we got a pretty cool little shape going here. But it's still just a shape. Now we actually want to turn it into something. So, we'll manipulate this so we can see what we're doing a little bit. If we come back over to our data block for our curve, and we go down to geometry, we have several things to work with. Offset we're going to ignore for now because that deals with text. But we have extrude, so I'm just going to grab that and push that up a little bit till I'm happy, because that will extrude in the negative and positive z-axis. Then we have bevel depth, and I'm going to put a little bevel on this. I'm going to bevel it till that tail starts to touch. I kind of like that. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe we'll do it just a little till they're not quite touching. And we also have a bevel resolution. Now we can crank this up and it'll give us a really smooth edge. But I'm going to leave that at 0, and I've decided I am going to bring that up till they touch, because I want the sharp bevel on it. There we go. I'm pretty happy with that. Last but not least, just like we took a mesh and created a curve out of it in our lab, we can hit Alt-C, and we can do the reverse and make this curve into a mesh. Now, if I go into Wireframe, we can see that we have a nice mesh to work with. All right, that was a lot to take in, and I'm going to challenge you guys to attempt to make 2 or 3 of your own shapes or logos, just playing around, and see what you come up with. I can't wait to see it, and see you in the next video.